It's always been wrong in the past, and it's wrong today. Some of the gloom is based on statistics that don't reflect the whole picture. Like every G7 country, our growth was slower in the years after the financial crisis than before it. But since 2010, the UK has grown faster than France, Japan, and Italy, not at the bottom, but right in the middle of the pack. Since the Brexit referendum, we've grown at about the same rate as Germany. Yes, we've not returned to pre-pandemic employment or output levels, but an economy that contracted 20% in a pandemic still has nearly the lowest unemployment for half a century. And whilst our public sector continues to recover more slowly than we would like from the pandemic, strengthening the case for reform, our private sector has grown 7.5% in the last year. Yes, inflation has risen, but it's still lower than in 14 EU countries, with interest rates rising more slowly than in the US or Canada. And yes, we have to improve our productivity, but output per hour worked is now higher than pre-pandemic. And last week, a survey of business leaders by PwC said the UK was the third most attractive country for CEOs expanding their businesses. Economists and journalists know you can spend a long time arguing the toss on statistics. But the strongest grounds for optimism comes not from debating this or that way of analysing data, but from what we've been hearing about this morning, our long-term prospects. Because when it comes to the innovation industries that will shape and define this century, the UK is powerfully positioned to play a leading role. Let's just look at some of them. In digital technology, as we heard from Michelle, we have become only the third economy in the world with a $1 trillion sector. We've created more unicorns than France and Germany combined, with 8 UK cities now home to 2 or more unicorns. The London-Oxford-Cambridge triangle has the largest number of tech businesses in the world outside San Francisco and New York. PwC say that UK GDP will be up to 10% higher in 2030 because of AI alone. FinTech attracted more funding last year than anywhere in the world outside the US. Or life sciences, where we also have the largest sector in Europe and a brilliant advocate with our superb Science Minister, George Freeman. We produced one of the world's first COVID vaccines, estimated to have saved more than 6 million lives worldwide. We identified the treatment most widely used to save lives in hospitals, saving more than 1 million lives across the globe. We're behind only the US and China in terms of high-quality life science papers published, and every one of the world's top 25 biopharmaceutical firms has operations in the UK. Another big growth area is our green and clean energy sector. The UK is a world leader here, with the largest offshore wind farm in the world. Last year, we were able to generate an incredible 40% of our electricity from renewables. And on one day, a rather windy December the 30th, we actually got 60% of our electricity from renewables, mainly wind. McKinsey estimate that the global market opportunity for UK green industries could be worth more than £1 trillion between now and 2030. And we're proceeding with a new plant at Sizewell C, led by our brilliant business secretary, who also spoke very wisely and surprisingly classically earlier on. And I could also talk about our creative industries, which employ over 2 million people, grew at twice the rate of the UK economy in the last decade, and have made the UK the world's largest exporter of unscripted TV formats, helped give us a top 3 spot in the Portland Soft Power Index. Or our advanced manufacturing sector, key to exports, where we produce around half the world's large civil aircraft wings and its biggest aero engines, as well as around half the world's Formula One Grand Prix cars. And the golden thread running through the industries where Britain does best is innovation. Amongst the world's largest economies, the Global Innovation Index ranks us 4th globally. those innovation industries now account for around a quarter of our output. They've been responsible for nearly all our productivity growth since 1997. And they're also the reason that all of you are here. In the audience, we've got leaders from Meta, Microsoft, Amazon, Apple and Google, the world's largest tech companies, all with major operations in the UK. We've got Monzo and Revolut, shining examples from our world-beating fintech sector. We have founders and CEOs from some of our most exciting UK technology companies like Proximi and Matilon. You are vital for Britain's economic future, but Britain is vital for your future too. So I want to ask all of you to help our country achieve something that is both ambitious and strategic. I want to ask you to help turn the UK into the world's next Silicon Valley. What do I mean by that? If anyone is thinking of starting or investing in an innovation or technology-centered business, I want them to do it here. I want the world's tech entrepreneurs, life science innovators, and green tech companies to come to the UK because it offers the best possible place to make their visions happen. And if you do, we will put at your service not just British ingenuity, but British universities to fuel your innovation, Britain's financial sector to fund it, and a British government that will back you to the hilt. Our universities are ranked second globally for their quality and include 3 of the world's top 10. In order to support the groundbreaking work they do in so many new fields, the government has protected our £20 billion research budget, now at the highest level in history. And as you look for funding to expand, we offer one of the world's top 2 financial hubs and the world's largest net exporter of financial services. The capability of the City of London, combined with the research strengths of our universities, makes our aspiration to be a technology superpower not just ambitious, but achievable. And today I'm here to say the government is determined to make it happen. But like any business embracing new opportunities, we should also be straight about our weaknesses. Structural issues like poor productivity, skills gaps, low business investment, and the over-concentration of wealth in the southeast have led to uneven and lower growth. Real incomes haven't risen by as much as they could as a result. Confidence in the future, though, starts with honesty about the present. So we want to be one of the most prosperous countries in Europe, and today I want to set out our plan to address those issues. That plan, our plan for growth, is necessitated, energised, and made possible by Brexit. The desire to move to a high-wage, high-skill economy is one that's shared on all sides of that debate, and we need to make Brexit a catalyst for the bold choices that will take advantage of the nimbleness and flexibilities that it makes possible. So this is a plan for growth. It's not a series of measures or announcements, which will have to wait, I'm afraid, for budgets and autumn statements in the years ahead. But this plan is a framework against which individual policies will be assessed and taken forward. And I set out that plan, those priorities, under 4 pillars. They build on the people, capital, ideas themes set out by the Prime Minister last year in his May's lecture, and as such are the pillars essential for any modern innovation-led economy. For ease of memory, the 4 pillars all happen to start with the letter E, the 4 E's of economic growth and prosperity, and they are enterprise, education, employment, and everywhere. So let's start with the first E, which is enterprise. If we're to be Europe's most prosperous economy, we need to have, quite simply, its most dynamic and productive companies. Now, there's a wide range of literature citing the importance of entrepreneurship on business dynamism, whereby more productive firms enter and grow and less productive firms shrink. But I don't just believe the theory, I've put it into practice. I set up and ran my own business for 14 years. It was one of the best decisions I ever made, and I actually owe it to Margaret Thatcher and Nigel Lawson. Because by the time I got to university and was thinking about my career options, they had changed attitudes towards entrepreneurship. Had they not, I would probably have ended up in the city or the civil service. Instead, I took a different route to end up in the Treasury, less the fast stream, more the long way round. But like thousands of others setting up on their own, I learnt to take calculated risks, to live with uncertainty, and to work through failures, of which there were many. Every big business was a startup once. And we won't build the world's next Silicon Valley unless we nurture battalions of dynamic new challenger businesses. Today, we are already ranked by the World Bank as one of the best places to do business amongst large European nations, second only to America in the G7. And the result of that pro-business climate is that since 2010, we've created more than 1 million new businesses in this country. But the question I want to ask is, how are we going to generate the next million? And firstly, we need lower taxes. In Britain, even after recent tax rises, we have one of the lowest levels of business tax as a proportion of GDP amongst major countries. But we should be explicit. High taxes directly affect the incentives which determine decisions by entrepreneurs, investors, or larger companies about whether to pursue their ambitions in Britain. With volatile markets and high inflation, sound money must come first. But our ambition should be to have nothing less than the most competitive tax regime of any major country. That means restraint on spending. In case anyone is in any doubt about who will actually deliver that restraint to make a low-tax economy possible, I gently point out that in the 3 weeks since Labour promised no big government chequebook, they've made £45 billion of unfunded spending commitments. But it isn't just about lower taxes. We also need a more positive attitude to risk-taking. Let's start with one of the most public risks taken this year. Richard Branson, his team, and the UK Space Agency deserve massive credit for getting Launcher One off the ground in Cornwall. The mission may not have succeeded this time, but what we learn from it will make future success more likely. And we should heed the words of Thomas Edison, who said, "I haven't failed 10,000 times. I've successfully found 10,000 ways that will not work." Edison was American, and our attitude to risk in this country can still be too cautious compared to our US friends. But we are capable of smart risk-taking in this country. At the start of the pandemic, we bought over 350 million doses of vaccine without knowing if they would actually work. And we ended up with one of the fastest, most effective vaccine programs in the world. We also need, if we're going to deliver those competitive enterprises, smarter regulation. Brexit's an opportunity not just to change regulations, but also to work with our experienced, effective, and independent regulators to create an economic environment which is more innovation-friendly and more growth-focused. Our Chief Scientific Advisor, Sir Patrick Vallance, is currently reviewing how the UK can better regulate emerging technologies in high-growth sectors, and the government's identifying where to reform the laws we inherited from the EU. In the digital space, Sir Patrick is working with the brilliant Matt Clifford, who we heard from earlier, and our amazing Culture Secretary, Michelle Donnellan, both of whom gave excellent speeches. Before we conclude those findings, we want to hear from you, and that's why we've invited you this morning. And we'll repeat that process for green industries, life sciences, creative industries, and advanced manufacturing. Finally, when it comes to the E of enterprise, there is a critical need for easier access to capital, particularly scale-ups. I'm supporting important changes to the pensions regulatory charge cap. I've used the regulatory flexibility provided by Brexit to change the Solvency II regulations, which will begin to be implemented in the coming months. Alongside other measures announced in the Edinburgh reforms, this could unlock over £100 billion of additional investment into the UK's most productive growth industries. But there's much more to be done, and I want to harness the ideas and expertise in this room to turn the E of enterprise into an enterprise culture built on low taxes, reward for risk, access to capital, and smarter regulation. Now, the next E is education. And this is an area where we have made dramatic progress in recent years, thanks to the work of successive Conservative education ministers. The UK has risen nearly 10 places in the global school league tables for maths and reading since 2015 alone. Our teachers and lecturers are some of the very best in the world. As the Prime Minister said, having a good education system is the best economic, moral and social policy any country can have. And that's why in the autumn statement we gave schools an extra £2.3 billion of funding, and why the Prime Minister recently prioritised the teaching of maths until 18. But there is much to improve. We don't do nearly as well for the 50% of school leavers who don't go to university as we do for the ones who do. We have around 9 million adults with low basic literacy or numeracy skills, over 100,000 people leaving school every year unable to reach the required standard in English and maths. And that matters. We are becoming an adaptive economy in which people are likely to have to train for not one, but several jobs in their working lives. Not having basic skills in reading and maths makes that difficult, sometimes impossible. And equally important is what happens beyond school. We've made progress with T-levels, boot camps and apprenticeships, and Sir Michael Barber is advising the government on further improvements to the implementation of our reform agenda. And we want to ensure our young people have the skills that they would get in Switzerland or Singapore. If we want to reduce dependence on migration and become a high-skill economy, the E of education will be essential. And that means ensuring opportunity is as open to those who don't go to university as to those who do. So, Silicon Valley enterprises, Finnish and Singaporean education skills. Let me now turn to the third E, which is employment. If companies can't employ the staff they need, they can't grow. High employment levels have long been a strength of our economic model. Since 2010, we have seen a record employment rate, the lowest unemployment in nearly 50 years, and labour market participation at an all-time high, partly thanks to the coalition reforms of a decade ago. We are at 76% employment levels, higher than Canada, the US, France, or Italy. But the pandemic has exposed weaknesses in our model. Total employment is nearly 300,000 people lower than pre-pandemic, with around 1/5 of working-age adults economically inactive. Excluding students, that amounts to 6.6 million people, an enormous and shocking waste of talent and potential. Of that 6.6 million people, around 1.4 million want to work, but a further 5 million don't. So it's time for a fundamental programme of reforms to support people with long-term conditions or mental illness to overcome the barriers and prejudices that prevent them from working. We will never harness the full potential of our country unless we unlock it for each and every one of our citizens. Nor will we fix our productivity puzzle unless everyone who can participate does. So to those who retired early after the pandemic or haven't found the right role after furlough, I say Britain needs you, and we will look at the conditions necessary to make work worth your while. That's why employment is such a vital third E. Enterprise, education, employment. Three key components for our long-term prosperity. And I conclude with my final E, everywhere. That means ensuring the benefits of economic development are felt not just in London and the South East, but across the whole of the UK. It is socially divisive if young people feel the only way to make a decent living is to head south. But it's also economically damaging. If our second cities were the productive powerhouses we see in other major countries, our GDP would be nearly 5% higher, making us second only to the United States and Germany for GDP per head. And that's why levelling up really matters, and why last week it was so exciting to see the progress being made. Since February 2020, when the levelling up agenda really got underway, 70% of new employed jobs have been created outside London and the South East. Thanks to our powerhouse regions, we remain one of the top 10 manufacturers globally, and the same is starting to happen with new industries, whether fintech in Bristol, gaming in Dundee, clean energy in Teesside. Every region has seen pay grow faster than London since 2010, which shows that our approach to regional growth is working. But there's much more to do. And whilst government grants can play a galvanizing role, they aren't the whole answer. We also need the connectivity that comes from better infrastructure. That's why in the autumn statement we protected key projects like HS2, East West Rail and Core Northern Powerhouse Rail. Digital connectivity matters as well, which is why under Michelle's leadership, full fibre broadband is now available to more than 40% of homes in the UK. Last year, 4 million more premises got access, with the biggest increases in Scotland and Northern Ireland. But the E of everywhere has to be about local wealth creation as much as about local infrastructure. So this year we will announce investment zones, mini Canary Wharfs, supporting each one of our growth industries, each one focused in high potential but underperforming areas, in line with our mission to level up. They'll be focused on our research strengths, executed in partnership with local government, with advantageous fiscal treatment to attract new investment. And we'll shortly start a process to identify exactly where they'll go. But spreading opportunity everywhere needs local decision-making alongside local infrastructure and local enterprise. So we must also give civic entrepreneurs more ability to find and fund their own solutions without having to bang down a Whitehall door. Shortly, over 50% of the population of England will be covered by a devolution deal, and 2/3 covered by a unitary authority, and that's a very important part of that. But we need to move more decisively towards fiscal devolution so that fantastic local leaders like Ben Houchen and Andy Street have the tools they need to deliver for their communities. So 4 E's: enterprise, education, employment, everywhere. 4 E's to unlock our national potential to be one of Europe's most exciting, most innovative, and most prosperous economies. Bill Gates is supposed to have said people overestimate what they can do in 1 year and underestimate what they can do in 10. When it comes to the British economy, we're certainly not going to fall into that trap. We will remember the essential foundation on which long-term prosperity depends, namely the sound money that comes from bringing down inflation. But right now starts our longer-term journey into growth and prosperity. World-beating enterprises to make Britain the world's next Silicon Valley. An education system where world-class skills sit alongside world-class degrees. Employment opportunities that tap into the potential of every single person so businesses can build the motivated teams they need. And as talent is spread everywhere, so we will make sure opportunities are as well. Yes, there are many structural challenges to address, and working through our 4 pillars, we will do just that, never forgetting, though, the combination of bold ingenuity and quiet confidence that defines our national character. Ladies and gentlemen, being a technology entrepreneur changed my life. Being a technology superpower can change our country's destiny. So let's make it happen. Thank you very much.
Take that. I think it's better if you take that one so they can hear you. Chancellor, thank you very much indeed for that very substantive speech and a very wide-ranging exposition of some of the opportunities and a candid assessment of some of the challenges ahead. The Chancellor's kindly agreed to take some questions. Let me start, if I may, first. You've been in office since October, been through some significant moments, speeches, and changes. As you reflect on those first few months, what are your sort of key takeaways, and how has it actually sort of impacted your view on the overall economy now that you're actually in post?
Well, obviously I've learned a massive amount in the 3 months that I've been doing the job, but let me say the thing that hasn't changed from the days that I set up my own business from scratch back in the early 1990s. I think the most successful organizations are ones that manage to combine tackling the short-term problems, doing all the short-term firefighting that any business, any organization has to do, but never allowing that to deflect you from a longer-term vision. And what I'm trying to outline today is what that longer-term vision is. And we know that we have to deliver on these 5 priorities. They are the British people's priorities. And as far as the economy is concerned, getting inflation down is absolutely central. And we won't stop at anything to do that. But we also know that if we're going to unlock our potential, we have to do more than that. And by the way, this is a project that is not going to happen in the next 18 months or the time span before the next election. And really what I'm trying to say is there is an incredible opportunity for us as a country, and we've just got to grab it. And there are things we can do now as steps on that journey, even if we're not going to get all the way there. But I would say that becoming the world's next Silicon Valley is the opportunity that if I'm able to unlock with the brilliant team of ministers you've heard from this morning, would be the thing that all of us are most proud of in 20 years' time, if it happens, when we're long gone from the front pages of your newspapers. And I think that's something really, you'll be pleased for that for another reason, but you know, I think that's something we should all be proud of and work hard for.
Thank you. Let's get into the questions that Chancellor's kindly agreed to take. Joe Hills from ITV. Is Joe here? Yep, there's a roving mic. It will be with you shortly. There you go.
Thank you very much. It's Joel Hills from ITV News. Chancellor, you are a glass half full man, and quite right too. That's good to see. I want to pick up on the point you made about declinism. The evidence clearly shows that, as you point out, many countries have struggled with low growth in the last decade or so. The evidence also shows that the UK is towards the back of the pack. The evidence also shows that since 2010, the typical household in the UK has seen their living standards fall relative to countries we like to compare ourselves to, like France and Germany. Your speech suggests you don't acknowledge these things. If you can't see the problem, Chancellor, why would voters believe that you can fix it?
Joe, I think...
Joel, sorry.
John, sorry.
No, Joel.
Joel.
Third time.
Joel. Let's get that bit right, at least. I think you're completely wrong. My entire speech is about how we deal with the productivity paradox, which has been at the heart of why we haven't seen that growth in real incomes. If we don't invest in improvements in our education system, improvements in our skills, if we don't find opportunities for the millions of people who could work, could contribute to our economy, but don't at the moment, we're not going to solve that productivity paradox. And I don't think it matters if you're on the left or on the right. Economists agree that is the central issue. If we address the 4 pillars that I talk about, we solve that, we can start to see a sustained growth in real incomes. And I would just say that if you look at what's been happening, I don't accept that we're towards the back of the pack compared to what other countries are saying. I think any accurate examination of the statistics says that we've been affected in broadly the same way as our peer countries. The difference is our long-term opportunity. Just last year, becoming the world's third trillion-dollar tech economy shows that even in really difficult times, we can make incredible progress.
Jim Pickard, Financial Times. Mike for Jim.
Quick question. First, have you ever paid a penalty to HMRC? And then the wider question is, Britain is under pressure from the Inflation Reduction Act in the US with over £300 billion of subsidies for green industries. We now have a backlash from the EU with Brussels gathering European countries to do similar activities. All we've heard so far from ministers is complaints that this is all terribly unfair. I know you don't want to talk about specific measures in your budget, but is the government thinking hard about how to do something to help British green businesses and industries which is facing this major threat? Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. On your first question, I'm not going to talk about my personal tax affairs, but I don't think there's anything you'd find interesting to write about, if I can put it that way. On your second question, yes, we have some concerns about the Inflation Reduction Act. And the reason is because we believe in free trade, and we believe that if we're going to get to net zero, which is extremely important, we will be more effective if we exploit the competitive advantage that we have, that the United States have, that Asian countries, that EU countries have. We will get there faster and more cheaply than we would otherwise do. But are we worried about the long-term future of our clean energy industries? Absolutely not. We have the second largest wind capacity in the world after China, the single largest wind farm. We are second only to Germany in Europe for our generation of electricity from renewables. We have a massive amount of investment, and we have a massive queue of people who would like to invest more. So we've got great opportunities. I'm sure we're going to sort out those problems, but you know, we have said clean energy is one of our 5 key sectors. And by the way, nuclear is a very important part of that, and despite the financial constraints, we prioritize Sizewell to show that we're going to make progress in that area too.
Paul Kelso, Sky News. Paul around.
Hi, Chancellor. Paul Kelso, Sky News. You've talked about honesty and you've talked about Brexit. The reality of Brexit for many companies is delays, red tape, additional costs. They can't hire the people they want to come to this country, and you can't stop the people you don't want to come to this country. Would it not be more honest to acknowledge that Brexit is failing on its own terms for business, and those terms need to be readdressed?
No. And I think if you look at the facts, our growth has been, as I said in the speech, about the same as Germany since the Brexit referendum. It's a big change in our economic relations with our closest neighbours, and of course that is going to need adaptation, and of course there is some short-term disruption. But I think it's completely wrong to just focus on that without looking at the opportunities. For example, in the autumn statement, the Solvency II reforms, which are only possible because of regulatory flexibilities that we wouldn't have had inside the EU, mean that we will unlock potentially over £100 billion of investment into the industries represented by people in this room. So in the end, Brexit is a choice, it's an opportunity, and we can make it an incredible success, and I believe we will.
Harry Cole from The Sun.
Good morning, Chancellor. Thank you. I noticed you didn't answer the specifics of Jim's question there. Can I just push you on that? Have you ever paid a tax penalty to HMRC? And on a theme, the Prime Minister last week said that tax cuts this year would be idiotic. Do you agree with that sentiment? And if I may, the Transport Secretary said last year that HS2 Phase 1 to Birmingham was on time and on budget. Do you share his optimism, or will we be seeing you open the Treasury's famously generous coffers to get it back on track?
Well, I think it was a good way of squeezing 3 questions into one, Harry. I'll repeat what I said to Jim, that I'm not going to talk about my personal tax affairs. By the way, I don't think that people at home are remotely interested in personal tax affairs. They're interested in these things, and that's what the government needs to be focusing on. HS2 was a specific priority for me in the autumn statement. I think that it is a source of national embarrassment that the Japanese opened their first high-speed line between Tokyo and Osaka in 1964, 2 years before I was born. And I am incredibly proud that under a Conservative government, for the first time, we have shovels in the ground for the London to Birmingham part of HS2, and we are absolutely committed to showing that we can deliver big, important infrastructure projects. And by the way, I think they're extremely important for levelling up. And what was your third question? It was tax cuts. Well, look, the biggest and quickest tax cut that the Prime Minister and I can deliver for families up and down the country is to halve inflation. That is eating away at people's pay packets, their spending power. It's pushing up the price of the weekly shop. And that is something we can deliver quickly and will help everyone. We are committed, as I made very clear, to a low tax economy. And the difference between Conservatives and Labour is that we cut taxes when we can, they never do. And that's because we recognise that a low tax economy is one of the vital ingredients for dynamism, entrepreneurialism, to encourage people to take risks, and that's why we want to do it when the time is right.
Dr. Nadine Hachak-Haram from Proximi. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
Yes, you did. Thank you for that. Good morning. I'm asking this question really with two hats. One, as an NHS surgeon, but also as a CEO and founder of a digital tech company. We see digital health platforms as a growing industry here in the UK, and obviously they offer an incredible opportunity to provide solutions to some of the key challenges we're facing on the front line: workforce, productivity, quality and safety for patient care. What role do you see them playing? But more importantly, how will you support the adoption, translation and scale of these solutions across the NHS?
Well, you know, this is absolutely something that I think has to be a huge priority. It was a big priority for me when I was Health Secretary. I started the NHS app, which became incredibly important during the pandemic. It's a huge priority for Steve Barclay. And what I would say to you as a surgeon is that globally we have a shortage of 2 million doctors, and we need to train more in the UK. But actually, we are not going to close that gap unless we embrace the opportunities of technology, both to help people work more efficiently administratively, so that surgeons don't find that you know, they have an empty operating table because a patient hasn't arrived, but also because technology has a huge role in prevention and stopping people needing to go to hospital in the first place. So I think there's a huge opportunity. I also think there's a huge opportunity here in the UK, because despite the pressures that we see daily in the NHS, we happen to have the world's best digital health record for 50 million people. And if we can use that in a way that allows information to be shared, allows research to happen, we can offer something that just can't be offered by other countries.
John Boomfrey from Amazon.
Good morning, John Boomfrey from Amazon. Chancellor, I welcome your remarks and your compelling vision for the UK to become the next Silicon Valley. My question was on your second pillar of education. What more can government and business do in partnership in the short to medium term to create the right skills environment that's required to deliver this future growth?
Well, thank you. I mean, it's a really important question, and there's obviously a lot that government can do because we're responsible for the schools system. But when it comes to skills and apprenticeships, we can only do this in partnership with business. The apprenticeship programme has been an extraordinary success. The first visit I did as Chancellor after the autumn statement was to see HS2 being built at a junction outside Birmingham, and I spent time talking to an apprentice who was incredibly proud. It was a 4-year degree apprenticeship. She was doing that, she was going to get a degree at the end of it, and she wasn't going to have any tuition fee debt either, and it's really taking off. But I think there are things where businesses can help us do more. And one particular area I think we would like to talk to you more about is what we could do to encourage older workers back into the workforce and also to discourage them from retiring. So more occupational health access to people who have a mental health problem, a back problem, when they are potentially thinking of leaving the workforce. I think that's something where employers can have a really big role. Also, I think when it comes to apprenticeships, there is a sense that apprenticeships are for young people, but there are lots of people who are ready and willing to consider a new career in their early 50s. They're expecting to work potentially for another 20 years. And they might need a slightly different type of apprenticeship, a slightly shorter type of apprenticeship. And I think that could be very good for you at Amazon. It could be good for everyone here. So that's a dialogue that with Gillian Keegan we very much hope to pursue.
Right, we're going to wrap it up there for a breakout and networking session, and then we're going to go to our various roundtables and panels. Chancellor, thank you very much indeed for that speech. Thank you for the questions, but thank you for everything that you're doing in terms of engaging with business. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Carl. Thank you.
Thanks again. That number on...